Hi, my name is John Slaughter with the Editor Extensions team, and today I want to demonstrate what flow editing could look like within an integrated development environment like VS Code, which is what I'm going to demo out of today. And just so that everyone knows, this is available today inside of the Editor Extension so that you could go and test this out and play around with it yourself. So I've opened up a repository that has Duo enabled. This is the GitLab language server project. I can go to anywhere within this directory or anywhere on my machine. I could actually create a YAML file. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I've chosen to put it inside of the .gitlab and flows directory. But if I just said this is going to be flow.yaml, I can now open this YAML file as a flow within the flow builder. This won't be available unless you enable a feature flag. That feature flag is available within you could set up either in user settings or limit it to the workspace. I'm going to go ahead and put it in my user settings, which I already have here, and we'll see gitlab.featureflags.flowbuilder. I'm going to set that from false to true. Once I save that or add this entirely, I can go back to any YAML file, and on this top ribbon where I have various things that I can do with that file, you'll also see a button called the Open GitLab Flow Builder. And if I click that, I can open up the Flow Builder and I can start making edits right away. So I can start I can start bringing in components, and I can start putting these components together, and I'm seeing right now that there's a validation error, so I can't save. That validation error is because we already have a entry point, but that entry point has a precedent node because I put a tool in here. If I set this to the entry point, all of our validation errors go away. I can now save. We can go look right back over here and see that the flow YAML is available. I can start making changes. So for instance, if I wanted to rename what this tool is, and I said something like, this is my read file tool, something like that, gave it the tool name of read file. Right now, this is very text input. It follows the V1 schema for our flow execution. But eventually, we would want to be able to have like a tool registry where we can pull these down, and so you wouldn't have to do this by hand. Anyways, moving on. So I should be able to do this. I can click save, and we start seeing that, yes, we've updated the name. We also have what tools are available to this. We can also have an agent. Agent can have a tool set. So I could say, hey, the agent has grep, and I can add that, and so on and so forth. And this agent, I can give it a name. I could, for simplicity, let's just call it agent for right now. Let's go ahead and save it. We can see our changes being applied over here. Right now, an agent would require a prompt, which we could either create a local prompt or set up from the remote GitLab prompt registry. If we go to the remote prompt registry, we need a prompt ID and what version of that prompt. We're going to go with local prompt here, and when you do this, you'd be able to set up a system prompt, a user prompt, and then you would be able to set up providers like I'm going to use Anthropic or OpenAI. I'm going to set up a model, so on and so forth. We won't do this by hand right now, just for simplicity. But then once I save that off, we can see that, okay, now we have a prompt. This is going to be called the agent prompt, and it's going to have its parameters, and then what were its prompt template, and so on and so forth. Fantastic. So this is tremendously easier than having to edit the YAML by hand, especially if you ended up doing something where, I've got to go change a component name. It's tremendously easy to go like, okay, this is now going to be called my agent. But then I would need to make sure that I update that in every possible thing that references agent. So that could even be things like my router needs to make sure that we're routing to my agent, and so on and so forth. I'm pretty sure that I should be able to reload this. No, see, I've got some kind of validation issue with the YAML just by trying to do it by hand. So we're gonna go back to there, reload, or reopen. Yeah, excellent. So it just kind of goes to show that editing these YAML files by hand is very difficult, but having some sort of editor where it makes sure that everything's in line and works seamlessly is tremendously easier. And eliminate some of that configuration issues that are so easy to run by. So let's go ahead and do a slightly more complicated flow. I'm going to just pull one out that I have written earlier. We're going to save that. Let's go ahead and close out of this. Save. Let's go ahead and reopen the flow builder. And we now have this flow that I've just pasted in here, and I've opened this flow. We can see where the source of that flow is located. It's a file. It's this file. So this flow has 3, and I'm just doing agents. Agents are super powerful. You can give them tools, and you can give them a prompt, and then they would produce some result that you could pass into another agent who could have its own set of tools, and so on and so forth. So I'm showing a very common example, or a very standard example of using like multi-agent workflows, where one agent is gathering a bunch of information that it's going to then parse out into relevant and non-relevant information to hand down to another agent that's going to do some sort of technical analysis. And then I have a final agent that's going to create some sort of executive summary over the whole thing. So this first one, we can go look at its local prompt, where it's a system prompt. It has a role where its job is to explore a code base, create a comprehensive map of its structure, key components, and notable patterns. And I won't read all this, but then we also have our user prompt, which says this is your objective, and it says go get started. Let's do what you're going to do. Then it'll hand it off to the technical analyst. Technical analyst has its own role, its own set of like an analysis framework. So it might even be looking at like documentation. What's the documentation quality around the feature that we're looking at? And at the end of the day, we're going to run this through the executive briefer, which has a output format where it's going to say, hey, we want to do key metrics and critical findings and recommended actions and stuff like that. Okay, so executive summary. We can see that these map into each other through inputs. So for instance, we saw the initial prompt asked for like the mission objective. So we're mapping our top level goal to the mission objective. We will see that the second agent has inputs that it needs called like scout findings and original objective. And we map the inputs of context goal, but we also map the input, which one input that we're going to map is the output of the original agent, which is, so in this case would be called context codebase scout dot final answer. Once again, this could, this is where if we go towards a more schema driven structure, which we definitely expect to do, a lot of this complexity around writing these out by hand would disappear entirely. And that should be, our North Star guiding light going forward, is to reduce and remove. I think we can reduce and remove 100% of configuration complexity and configuration errors. Excellent. So let's go ahead and run this and watch it. So if I click this run and debug over here in the corner, it'll open up a little console where it will define, it knows that we're asking for something called a goal. That's a top level field that we ask for here. And then it's saying, hey, we're missing this required field. So we'll go ahead and add that. I'm currently within the GitLab language server project. So I could ask it for something like, are there any risks to how authentication is handled in this project? And I will go ahead and click execute. And now we're in a running. So we're in a read-only mode. I can't make changes. I can't save. But I can look around at this. Eventually, we would want to see the feedback of where we currently are in the execution. So if we were currently at the codebase scout, which we are, we should see it highlighted and visibly demonstrated that we're currently, this is the agent that's currently working before passing it off to another agent. But we can see that we're calling, a bunch of different tools, mostly around reading files. And then now we've got a grep where it's like looking for local storage, session storage, looking for things like plain text or base64, encrypt, decrypt, hash, secure, cipher. So various things related to authentication. And it might take a little bit of time because it's going to be, parsing through this entire code base. And while that's going on, we can talk a little bit about our next steps and where we expect to go from here. So this has been a bit of a proof of concept project to see how we can what this would look like, what this would look and feel like. And I've been essentially the sole engineer on this, working with Dylan Bernardi and Shakar for reviews and just kind of like bouncing ideas off the wall. But I'm working now to sort of formalize this into an actual roadmap for where we can go and eventually reach some GA on this. I'm currently building out epics for this, and I expect that there are 3 key areas that I want to look at. One of those areas is just getting the actual canvas to be as to match the expectations that people have for a modern Canvas experience. This also includes things like being able to do bulk editing, copy paste, undo, redo, being able to very quickly move around. So that might even mean like a mini map, or because right now we have a fairly, and we finished our execution. We'll walk through the results of that in a second. But yeah, so I think that making sure that we have features even around like keyboard first navigation, or supporting things that would work for power users who expect to build these flows or want to run flows ad hoc for their own development workflows. So that's one big piece. The second piece I think is around like the dynamic nature of these nodes, and being able to essentially wrangle it so that there could be no possible configuration caused runtime exceptions. So we should be able to know exactly what a node will output. We should be able to know, be able to map those together. We should be able to move away from string-based inputs and more towards, hey, these are going to be drop downs, or a nice searchable field where you're going to be selecting from things that exist. And if you were to open up a flow where, let's say, potentially some remote registry prompt was removed, we should know immediately, and we should warn the user that, hey, this no longer exists, and we're in an error state that needs to be corrected. So all of those things are things that we can support there. And then we need to support execution from a in the same way that we would a debugger in an integrated development environment. So that means we should be able to see comprehensive logging around execution. That does not necessarily mean that we need to support sensitive information in those logs, but we should say if something goes wrong within the flow, that a user can debug it themselves. They can know what's going on. I think that also comes into play around things like we want to know what node is currently being run, and what tools it is called. We can kind of see that here, but we don't actually have a way currently with the way flow execution is set up where we can tie back what node produced that tool call. So we need that. And so, yeah, so our goal is around shoring up a lot of those around the execution and configuration side. Excellent. So yeah, let's walk through really quick what this kind of produced. We went through, as we can see here, let's jump back a tiny little bit. We should see an initial, we see an initial agent response. And where it talks about, hey, here's everything that we have found in our just scouting out the code base, finding relevant files, parsing through what's helpful and unhelpful. And this is great because what this agent's doing is yes, it's using its context window for parsing out what's relevant and not. Then it passes it down to the technical analyst, and the technical analyst finally comes out with, here's this technical assessment summary. We can look at it very quickly. There's some analysis on architecture. There's some concerns around storage architecture. So it has like some recommendations that it's created. And then we finally get like our executive intelligence briefing where it says, hey, here's our critical finding. Where it says, hey, we're storing authentication tokens in plain text in memory, where there's like significant credential theft risk. But that, is still an in-memory thing if you were going to do like a memory dump or something over the editor extension. So they have like overall security health is 4 out of 5 with strong foundations, but one critical gap. And so this could even, you could even bring this even further where if you had a condition, that there's some critical error or some, something that's worth following up on, let's go ahead and create an issue in GitLab and start tagging the appropriate people in. So we could always extend this flow to create, more follow-ups. So excellent. Yeah, this is a cool way to be able to quickly edit and iterate on flows, and hopefully, hopefully get away from some of the complexities around hand building YAML files, which we can see even this one together. This also includes all the flow stuff, but we're sitting at 500 lines of configuration. That's pretty dense. We should definitely, we're probably looking at more like 60, 70 lines of pure, non-template prompt configuration, but that's still a significant area for being very easy to misconfigure something. So having something like this that can help you along the way and make sure that you're all aligned, especially for the common pitfalls of working with YAML files or working with configurations in general, can be super helpful. So that's where we are today. Feel free, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to take questions or to demonstrate anything. If anyone has ideas about things that should be added to the roadmap or ideas to make this a cleaner user experience, then I'm absolutely happy to chat. So feel free to reach out if there's any questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. Bye.